Hello, America. Welcome to your Leo Nation, where you all know that we believe in and support the rule of law. I am the Chief, Mark Garrett. Welcome to the show. Um, Today we are winding down Peace Officer Memorial Week. Um, a solemn time. It should be, and I think it is for the most part, a solemn time across the country for those of us who either served or do serve in law enforcement, the family, of course, the families of our men and women in uniform across this great nation. It is a time to remember. And obviously, and foremost, it's a time to remember those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice for our freedoms, for our security here in our country, in our communities, our states, for those who've been injured, who've been maimed, who have been permanently disabled in the effort to uh, maintain a civil society. It is a time to remember those brave men and women. But I believe that it's also a time to remember those detractors. It's a time to remember those people who openly oppose the rule of law, who support chaos, who want disorder, who demean the men and women who put their butts on the line every day to make sure even those detractors, even those haters, yes, even those defund the police individuals are safe, that actually live in a civil society. These men and women don't care about your politics. They don't care about any of the immutable characteristics. They are there to do a job that 99.999% of the people, especially those detractors, would never do and will never do and can never appreciate what those men and women do, can never appreciate the sense of loss when a husband or a wife, a brother, a child realizes that they will never see their loved one again because they laid down their lives for, yes, even those people who demean the law enforcement profession. So, in addition to remembering some people who've given their lives in law enforcement that are special to me today, I do want to focus on what's become of a certain class of people in this country, what they have devolved into. Maybe they were always like this, but now they've shown their colors over the last several years. I want to talk about that because if we forget, if we forget what they have said and many continue to say, we are not doing what we need to do to fight this battle, the battle of retaining a civil society. We're not doing what we do if we let these statements just go away. Oh, they said something a few years ago. There was this movement or these movements and they've kind of subsided, blah, blah. No, these attitudes, these sentiments are always there. And they're always looking for the right time to make themselves known. They're always looking for the right time to leverage a particular circumstance or set of circumstances to impose certain ideologies on our society in general. And one of the ways to do that, of course, is to break down the law enforcement profession that ensures a civil society, that ensures the rule of law. That's how you create chaos. That's how you set the building on fire. And then later on, you come back to pretend to be the firefighter and save all of mankind. This is exactly what these people do. And we damn well better never forget that they are always there. They are always there. They were there in 2020. They're there today, and they'll be here forever. It's our job to support the profession that protects us, quite frankly, as a society from each other and from these people who want to destroy the law enforcement profession. So with that said, I would like to read um, a couple of things here. I'm going back to 2022 for a reason, because, like I said earlier, even if these statements kind of subside, we have to remember we have to hold people accountable for the statements, the horrible statements they made about law enforcement. When I say hold accountable, I don't want anything to happen to them. They have every right to say whatever they want to say. What I'm saying, what I say hold accountable, what I mean is we have to let them know we know who they are. We have to let them know we will never forget what their ultimate goal is or their goals are. So that's what I mean by hold accountable. We cannot let them off the hook when it comes to their true identity, to their true goals. We can never, ever let our guard down. So let's go back in time a little bit. And like I often try to do on Your Leo Nation, I try to use multiple sources when I'm talking. And this one here is from NBC, just so you know, to quote a famous news broadcast organization. I try to be fair and balanced with my sources here. So today I'm reading from NBC News, and this is from February 6, 2022. So about a year and a half or so after the George Floyd Summer of Love that I took part in as far as the law enforcement side in Los Angeles County. This is titled How Democrats Went from Defund to Refund the Police. A young Democratic member of Congress declared that defund the police, quote unquote, quote, moment, dead on Thursday, and Black Democrat mayors from San Francisco to New York, Chicago to Washington, D.C. are moving to increase police budgets and end the reign of criminals. And you remember when this all started? These people start making about faces. The mayor in San Francisco, we had them all over the place. They start making about faces from their positions just a couple of years earlier. When they're out, they're holding signs, they're doing XYZ, making these statements, demeaning police, calling for the defunding of police. And in just really less than a couple of years, they're making a 180-degree about face. You know why? Because it was their cities that were on fire, either literally or figuratively, with crime waves as a result of their attack on law enforcement. And now they realize politically that they can't survive. As violent crime surges ahead of the November midterms, President Joe Biden and the Democrat Party are toughening their talk on crime and refunding the police only 2 years after some progressive activists took up the call to defund them. Quote, people are still against crime and people want to be safe, said former Philadelphia Mayor Michael Nutter in an interview. You're seeing in communities all across the country that when folks actually come to grips with the conflict and rising crime rates in an effort to quote unquote take away from policing, the public being way ahead of the politicians as usual, figured out, quote, no, 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 that's not a good idea. We want to be safe. I have talked about this many times. It's not the elites in Brentwood or Bel Air, Beverly Hills, and Malibu, Martha's Vineyard, you name the elite city or town or region in this country. It's not these elites that suffer when law enforcement is diminished, when law enforcement's ability to enforce the law, to put criminals behind bars. It's not these people who suffer. Who suffers? The people who can least afford it, the people who are least able to fight back, the people who don't have fences around their communities, walls around their homes, private security to watch their homes and watch them and their children 24/7. It's these people in the inner cities. It's these people, yes, of color that are most likely to suffer the effects of diminished law enforcement capacity. These progressives who say, oh, we're here for black people, we're here for Hispanic people, we're here for people of color, we're we're here to help the downtrodden. It's a lie. It's a sham. It's a game, and it's disgusting. We all know that the people who are harmed the most are the people being promised by the Democrat Party that the Democrat Party is looking out for them. It is an absolute lie, a falsehood, an untruth, however you want to articulate it. It is all a game. You look at Oakland, San Francisco, parts of Los Angeles County, New York City, Atlanta, Philadelphia, you name the city, and you tell me if these are elite strongholds. You tell me if these are the homes of multimillionaires and billionaires. No, of course not. Of course not. They're not affected by their own policies that they impose on other people. I've said this over and over on the show. I don't want you to forget. Don't forget. Remember what these people said and now how they're backtracking and running away from it. And again, I'm going back to 2022 because there's not so much of the defund out there anymore from elected officials because they know that is a political nightmare for them. It's a losing strategy. Let me continue here. 2 years after Democratic officials across the country aligned themselves with protesters demanding the police be reined in and progressives backed the elections of reformist prosecutors. The mayors of many of the nation's largest cities are now reversing course and leading calls for tougher stance on crime. These prosecutors, we know who they are in Philadelphia, in Los Angeles, in Baltimore, in LA, on and on and on and on. I don't have to say it. We all know who they are and where they are. It's not just the defund the police, soft on crime in general. It's the specifics of either not putting these criminals in prison, letting them out, letting them stay out after multiple offenses. And we just saw what happened just recently in New York City. NYPD officer was murdered by somebody who should have been in prison for life at that time before the incident happened, before he murdered the officer for all of the offenses, many of which were violent, including assault. He should have been in prison for life. This is the result of prosecutors not prosecuting the law, not holding people accountable. This is all part of the decarceration movement, which is part of the defund the police movement. It's all under the same umbrella, ladies and gentlemen. It's all an attack on the rule of law. You commit the crime, you do the time. It's a very, very simple formula that even the progressives should be able to figure out. As a matter of fact, they have figured it out. And they're working in absolute contrast, in contradiction, in defiance of that simple formula on purpose and with the goal of creating chaos in the society. Democrats acknowledge their answers on crime, stopping the flow of illegal guns, addressing poverty, reimagining law enforcement, treating addiction, and more difficult or are more difficult to convey in a campaign. What that means is they realize their message is a bunch of BS and it's not resonating with the electorate. The electorate is not buying it. That's what they mean. NBC, I'm not reading the whole article, but they go an NBC route on this a lot in this article. I'm reading the parts that actually make sense. But what that means in English is that the people who are voting for us or not voting for us are not buying the BS that we're trying to sell them, that we should take money from law enforcement and put it into this program and put it into quote unquote jobs programs and on and on and on. That's what that means. It's not that not receiving the message well. It's not that it's hard to explain to people. People understand it completely. They understand it. It's obvious. No, no, no. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. You're telling me you're going to take cops out of my neighborhood when my neighborhood's on fire with crime? I don't care where else you think you should be sending the money. I want to see more cops here putting more people in jail. And that's coming from the people in Oakland. That's coming from the people in San Francisco. That's coming from the people in Baltimore. That's coming from the people in Philadelphia. That's coming where crime hits home the hardest and the worst and the most often. That's coming from the people in Chicago. They're not interested in these cultural quote unquote fixes. They want the rule of law enforced. Simple as that. But James Carville, the veteran Democrat strategist who in the 1990s helped Bill Clinton overcome concerns that Democrats were soft on crime, said the party would be wise to follow the lead of its black mayors who are responding to their constituents' concerns. You think? No kidding. Let me say something about that. James Carville, strategist. And that's exactly the right word. When you see a party, when you see quote unquote leaders of the party, when you see progressive personalities in a party, I'm not talking about every Democrat. I have lots of Democrat friends who are as supportive of the rule of law enforcement and law enforcement as I am. I'm talking about the machine, ladies and gentlemen. I'm talking about the party in general and where it's going, where it's headed. When you hear someone like James Carville talk about these strategies and those strategies, I want you to think about that. I want you to think about that when you see the number of deaths every weekend, every week, of course, every week, but the weekends, the crime rate, no matter where you live, tends to accelerate. Every weekend in these cities, think about the number of young men, and yes, often, unfortunately, young black men who are murdered by other young black men. The number of senseless, felonious deaths that take place in these cities, lives snuffed out, parents grieving for the rest of their lives because their child was murdered. There's never a good reason for murder. Their child's life is taken away just because there's some other person out there who has the mind of an animal, who has no respect for life. And James Carville and the Democrat Party, as this article articulated, are worried about messages and strategies. That's what they're worried about. Strategies. Instead of being worried about principles, about principles, about belief systems, about right versus wrong. That's what they should be concerned about, but they are not. They lay it out over and over and over where our message is not resonating and the strategy of this, and we can't have people thinking we're soft on crime. And we ought to start doing what some of these other mayors are doing now because they're actually, getting some more votes back. They're worried about winning elections, gaining and retaining power. That's what we should not forget, ladies and gentlemen. They never talk about principles. They don't talk about right versus wrong. They don't talk about you do the crime, you do the time. When have you heard that? When have you heard that from a prominent Democrat leader? I'm asking you right now. Message me. When have you heard that? Hey, I don't care what someone looks like. I don't care what the color of their skin is. I don't care what their income is. I don't care who they worship. I don't care with whom they sleep. I don't care where they live. I don't care what education they have. If you commit a crime, you have to do the appropriate time. When have you heard that? You don't. Because it's not a strategy that they adopt. It's not a strategy that they believe will garner them votes, resulting in more power. This is how they wake up every day and breathe and get through the day. How can we win more votes? Not about if I tell people what I believe, period. People will buy in to my philosophy, period. They're looking for votes. They're looking to attack law enforcement, especially a few years ago, because at the time they thought that that was the right political strategy. By the way, not just elected officials, but you saw it in the private sector as well. You saw it with television, with cable companies and sports. You saw all this because they wanted to go along and get along to get along. By the way, of course, you saw it with so-called law enforcement leaders when they literally knelt at the knees or knelt on their knees at the feet of BLM leaders. Put that word in quote too. Where law enforcement, where chiefs of police knelt at the feet of BML leaders because they wanted to go along to get along. They didn't believe that crap. They didn't believe that they or their law enforcement officers were racist or going out and hunting black men and murdering. They didn't believe any of that crap. But they didn't have enough guts to stand up for what they knew was right and what they believed. They were cowards. And damn it, we cannot have cowards leading our men and women in law enforcement. We cannot have it. If you don't want to do the job, then resign, or you say what you believe and take the consequences from your boss. And that's why I see all the time that the best place to find out what a leader in law enforcement is really thinking, is really believing, is when you talk to a sheriff, because sheriffs are elected, they're not appointed. Talked about this when we had Sheriff Villanueva on just a show or two ago. Talked about this. But elected officials, elected sheriffs can actually speak their mind because they are accountable as far as elections to the voting public. We can't forget this. We cannot forget these people who let us down in law enforcement, who let us down as elected officials. So that's it with NBC. I want to follow up on the NBC article with this from talk about fair and balance. We're going to go to the Republican Study Committee, RSC. And this is from, actually, I forgot when this was from, probably a couple of years ago. But this is titled, Looking Back, Democrats Push to Defund the Police. Now listen to this quote, ladies and gentlemen. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. That's a quote from Maya Angelou, who, by the way, I think part of the probably the decarceration, defund the police movement would be my guess. I don't remember reading a quote from her, but her quote is exactly right. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. So those people who were out there screaming, yelling, demeaning law enforcement, demanding the defunding of law enforcement, believe them, ladies and gentlemen. That's what they want. That's what they believe. And they thought that that was going to be their road to political success. From the White House to the Speaker's office, Democrats are scrambling to distance themselves from the slogan they once so proudly championed, defund the police. This was a rallying cry for progressives throughout the last year. So this is probably 2021, I guess. After losing nearly a dozen seats and seeing the latest polling, take that back, it was probably a year after that. Democrats are now claiming it was actually Republicans who wanted to defund the police. No, really, we didn't think it was serious either. This is the author here. It's a messaging strategy so distorted and bizarre, even the Washington Post gave it 3 Pinocchios. And I remember hearing this in the last year or 2 years, that these progressives, the Democrat Party, different officials are claiming, no, it was Republicans calling for defunding and they want to defund the police. I mean, this is frightening. This is frightening that these people can be so dishonest, so nefarious as to say something. So this continues. I'm going to give you some quotes here. Who knows how long Democrats will try this new talking point before shame outweighs their desperation. But in an effort to reach across the aisle, RSC wanted to help our colleagues on the left get back to reality and stop embarrassing themselves. We looked for an example of a Republican calling for defunding or reimagining police, but we couldn't find anything. Democrats can't say the same. In fact, here are over, don't worry, it's not 2 dozen, but the quote is here are over 2 dozen examples of when they have, the Democrats here. And I just pull out a few. I want you to listen to this. Take their word for it. The author says the defund the police movement is one of reimagining the current police system to build an entity that does not violate us while refunding to invest in community services. Let's be clear. The people who now oppose this have always opposed calls for systemic change. Elon Omar, that's June 9th of 2020. The defund movement isn't new. Folks are just finally listening. We got money for wars, but can't feed the poor. Ayanna Pressley, June 16th, 2020. Instead of spending $80 billion a year on jails and incarceration, we need to be investing in more jobs and education. One thing's abundantly clear. Every police department violating people's civil rights must be stripped of federal funding, period. Bernie Sanders, June 4th, 2020. And my God, can we get into examples of the federal government violating people's rights? That could be 20 shows we could do that on. But Bernie Sanders thinks that they should basically defund every department because I'm sure he claims that every department has violated someone's civil rights. A couple of more. This is the same Sacramento department that murdered Stephen Clark. The leadership of the department and all of these officers must be fired. Then the department must be dismantled and policing, was the word again, reimagined. This is Mondaire Jones. Now, he's a failed flunky former New York congressman who I looked up this research on, and guess what he's done? He's flipped. He's flipped now in the defund movement. He lost his reelection bid, and later on, during that reelection bid, he was flipping. He got redistricted. He went to a different district partly. And now, because of his constituents, he was trying to distance himself from the defund movement because it wasn't politically expedient for him. This is what I'm talking about a lack of principle, a lack of commitment to the truth, to the facts. It's hard and as difficult as they may be sometimes. But this clown here, he's as limp as a wet noodle when it comes to any level of conviction, except for what it might take to get him elected. And finally, this is a doozy. Too many police in our country are more concerned with protecting white supremacy than serving the communities that pay their salary. This is Jamal Bowman, another hack, another, I don't know what the word is. I try to keep this clean on this show, but he's another piece of human excrement, ladies and gentlemen. New York U.S. representative. And to say that the people in law enforcement, my Hispanic friends, my Black friends, my gay friends, yes, my white friends, my female friends, my Asian friends in law enforcement 30 years, and my friends that are still there, all those people, they're more interested in protecting, quote unquote, protecting white supremacy than serving their communities. This is disgusting. This is disgusting. This is why during Peace Officer Memorial Week and every week of the year, if you support law enforcement, if you believe in the necessity of law enforcement in order to maintain a civil society, you must not ever forget what these people have said and what today's Democrat Party stands for. You must not forget. Now, these individuals, if any of them come forward and say publicly, listen, I was wrong. I screwed up. I was out of my mind. Here's what I believe in. Here's what I support from now on. It's the rule of law. It's accountability. It's responsibility. You do X, Y, Z, you pay the price. If someone comes out with the Maya Cope and says that, hey, they're on my team, I'm on their team, I'm fine with that. I have no problem. But as long as they keep tiptoeing around this and trying to distance themselves from what they said, they're worse today than they were when they said it because they know better. They know how destructive that these policies that they have pushed are. They know how many lost lives are resulting from this type of foolishness, this nonsense, this anarchical kind of crap. They know they're costing lives with this stuff. They know they're ruining lives with this stuff. They know they are costing taxpayers untold amounts of money. They know they're ruining cities. They know they're turning San Francisco. They turned San Francisco from a jewel in the most beautiful state in the union to literally now a crap hole. They know that these policies have done that. Ladies and gentlemen, these policies have done that. They turned San Francisco into a place that my wife and I would make many, and I say many, I mean another small honeymoons out of every once in a while to go visit, stay for a few days, and enjoy ourselves with great food, beautiful views, to a place that we refuse to visit now because of how dirty and dangerous it's become. That's what these people have done. So until they completely, openly, and sincerely retract this crap, make a U-turn, and start living by a new philosophy, they're worse now than the day they said this, as far as I'm concerned, because they have seen the fruits of the crap they have spewed. So I want to finish up because, like I said at the opening, this is a week, in addition to what I just talked about not forgetting these despicable human beings, but remembering and honoring those people, those law enforcement officers who have paid the ultimate sacrifice to protect us. And since they start keeping track, actually, it goes back to, I think, 1786, I believe. So about 24,067 to be exact, police officers across the country have died in the line of duty. And just last year through 2023, I think it's 118 um, died last year. It, I obviously, this is a time to honor all of those men and women. But of course, I was with one agency for 30 years. And I was just thinking about this earlier today. And when I talked earlier about each one of these deaths, it impacts untold numbers of people, starting with the immediate family of these fallen officers. And I haven't had that, in my family. My brother, as many of you know, he was a police officer for a few years, and he was a LA City firefighter for 33 years, I believe, after that. I've never had, thank goodness, I've never had a family member die in the line of duty, but I've known a lot of people personally, worked with a lot of people over the years that have given their lives to protect me, their families, their communities, and their state of California. And I just want to take a little bit of personal time, and I hope you'll stay with me. It's just about 5 minutes. I want you to hear the stories, and they're very, very brief. I've cut them way down, of the people that I've known that have lost their lives, the California Highway Patrol. And by the way, to date, since the CHP's founding in 1929, 232 men and women have given their lives in the line of duty to protect and serve the people of California. So with that said, I'm going to go one by one with the people that I've known in the department that have given their lives and give you a little brief story. The first officer was in 1992 that I knew. His name was Fidel Alleman. He went by Phil. I didn't know Phil that well. I met him a few times. We didn't work at the same station, but sometimes we shared a restaurant on the border of our jurisdictions at about 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning for early breakfast before we went in for debriefing. I'll read you a story. This is Thursday, July 23rd, 1992. CHP officer shot to death. Fidel Alleman. Officer Fidel Alleman was driving to the Central Los Angeles office to report for a shift that began at 9:30 p.m. when a pickup truck made an unsafe lane change directly in front of him. Alleman flashed his lights and at the driver, and the pickup slowed. When the driver began to follow the patrolman with his high beams glaring, when the pickup continued to follow the officer, he exited the freeway. Alleman decided to confront the driver. As Alleman stepped out of his car, the driver slowly drove along the left side of the officer, then raised a gun and fired one shot through the truck's passenger window. Alleman was shot in the chest, fell back into the driver's seat, and fired one round at the suspect as he was speeding away. Officer Alleman, 33, and a member of the CHP for 8 years, died 20 minutes later. And as a footnote to that, ladies and gentlemen, that murder has never been solved. It was one of the largest investigations in Los Angeles County and the state of California, actually, that ever took place, and the suspect was never caught. God willing, we'll find the bastard, and he'll pay the price. John McVeigh Jr. John, I believe I met one time. Didn't know him that well, of course. Actually met him before I was on the job when I was an applicant. I met him at a station when I was doing a ride-along with another officer. CHP officer killed in collision. Saturday, April 17th, 1993. Officer John M. McVeigh Jr. was responding to an injury collision when he lost control of his patrol car as it rounded a curve. McVeigh's patrol car spun into the opposing lane of traffic, where it was struck broadside by an oncoming pickup truck. Although McVeigh was securely belted in his seat and his airbag deployed, the force of the impact killed the 38-year-old officer instantly. Officer McVeigh was a 13-year veteran of the California Highway Patrol and a 1992 King City Officer of the Year. He was very, very close friends with a close friend of mine, and I actually had to make the phone call to that mutual friend and notify him of John's death. You know, it's a very difficult phone call. Bruce Hinman, CHP officer killed on side of road, Tuesday, October 3rd, 1995. Officer Bruce Hinman was on routine motorcycle patrol on State Route SR 170 at US Highway 101 when he stopped to assist a disabled motorist. A drunk driver traveling at 60 miles an hour along US Highway 101 attempted to change routes by driving over a raised berm, then across the freeway onto the dirt shoulder, where he crashed into the disabled vehicle. The impact spun the disabled vehicle around, striking the motorist, who was using the freeway call box, and knocking Officer Hinman to the ground. The car came to rest with its rear wheels on top of the officer's chest, suffocating him. Officer Hinman, 34, was placed on life support but died a week later. He was a 9-year member of the CHP and was assigned to the West Valley area directly after graduating from the academy. Bruce and I worked on protective services detail together. That's the detail that does all the presidential motorcades, not just presidents, but heads of state. He and I worked together on that detail. I didn't know him that well, but we were working colleagues. Nora Vargas, 1996, first female CHP officer killed in the line of duty. Friday, November 8th, 1996, Officer Noreen A. Vargas was driving along the San Bernardino Freeway on her way to conduct a felony investigation when an oncoming tractor trailer rig lost its trailer's right dual tires, which bounced across the freeway lanes into the center divider. One of the tires struck the divider and careened 30 feet into the air and landed in Officer Vargas's vehicle. The impact crushed the vehicle's roof and killed Vargas instantly. The 37-year-old patrol officer was a member of the CHP for 8 years. Officer Noreen Vargas is the first female officer killed in the line of duty since the CHP began including women in its ranks in 1974. Noreen and I knew each other extremely well. We worked together on a task force. It was called IDTF, Impaired Distracted Driver Force. I got it backwards. Um, we worked a lot of nights together, arresting impaired drivers. When I got that news, well, it was just hard to believe. But the first female officer, again, Noreen Vargas, Hispanic lady, I guess she's one of the people supporting white supremacy in law enforcement that Jamal Bowman was referring to. Sorry, I broke my rhythm here. I'm just so angry. See, I know these people. Some very well, some hardly at all, but I know many of these people very well. When I see and hear and read quotes like that, it boils my blood because I know better. I know better. And these people say things like this are beyond despicable. Rob Coulter, officer dies in tragic accident Sunday, November 2nd, 2003. In a small town, it's easy to get to know all the local law enforcement officers, especially when they're friendly and helpful and active in the community. So the tight knit town of Weaverville was in mourning when Officer Rob Coulter died in a tragic accident. Coulter, 39, died November 2nd after a shotgun apparently discharged unintentionally while he was locking into place in his patrol car. I remember that day vividly. Rob and I worked together when we were in the same station in Los Angeles County before he transferred to Northern California. Joseph P. Sanders, Sanders struck by car on Rain-Slick Freeway, Monday, December 15th, 2008. I cannot believe this is 16 years ago almost. On Monday, December 15th, 2008, at approximately 4:30 a.m., Officer Joseph Paul Sanders of Santa Fe Springs area was struck by a car while laying a flare pattern in heavy rain. He was life flighted to USC Medical Center in Los Angeles, where he succumbed to his injuries a short time later. I remember that vividly. I was the public affairs coordinator for Southern Division of Los Angeles County at the time. And I was early on scene. I got the call for that and had to do a lot of media relations throughout the day, along with the commander. Actually was Captain Dan Miner at the time of that station. And I never met Officer Sanders, but I put that in there because I had there was so much of involvement I had with that entire incident. I thought that I would include that because I got to know his family a little bit and felt that I'd gotten to know him through them. Philip Ortiz, CHP officer struck while conducting an enforcement stop on June 9th, 2010. California Highway Patrol officer Phil Ortiz was conducting an enforcement stop on the right shoulder of northbound I-405, south of National Boulevard. During the enforcement stop, Officer Ortiz was struck from behind by a vehicle being driven on the right shoulder of the freeway. As a result of the collision, Officer Ortiz sustained major injuries. He succumbed to his injuries on June 22nd, 2010. Again, just like Officer Hinman, Phil and I worked together on the protective services detail assignment for many years. Didn't know Phil that well, but I did know him, and I was on scene all day with that, again, from a media relations point of view. And there's a lot more to that story, but that sums it up. There's two more here, and the final one is very, very personal to me. Second to last is Tom Coleman, CHP officer killed in collision while responding to a high-speed suspect. Early in the morning of Friday, June 2010, Officer Tom Coleman sustained fatal injuries in a collision while on his departmental motorcycle. At approximately 6:28 a.m., Officer Coleman initiated a traffic stop on a silver Ford Focus for a traffic violation in the city of Redlands. The Ford Focus fled from Officer Coleman committing numerous traffic violations at a high rate of speed. Officer Coleman had his lights and sirens activated. He was killed instantly. He collided with a big rig. I knew Tom since he was a brand new officer. He actually reported to the station where I was acting sergeant. I was waiting to promote, and I was doing my acting time as sergeant. And he was one of my brand new officers, and I knew him until the time that he transferred to the San Bernardino station, where he tragically lost his life. And finally, Officer Andy Ornelas. I'm gonna give you his ID 21685. On November 23rd, 2020, at approximately 7:05 p.m., Officer Ornelas was on patrol riding his departmental motorcycle in Palmdale when he was involved in a traffic collision. Officer Ornelas sustained multiple injuries and was transported to Antelope Valley Hospital, where he received around-the-clock care. He passed away December 2nd. Officer Ornelas is so special to me, not because I knew him. I'm not sure I ever met Andy. I believe that I did, but my relationship to Andy actually goes back to or through another former colleague of mine, and that's his mom. His mom, Kelly, and I were classmates in the Ohio Patrol Academy. And Kelly and I worked in the same division for years. We worked in adjoining areas, adjoining stations on graveyards for a number of years. She was in West Valley. I was in Altadena. We border each other. We would go to Western Bagel a lot, meet up, and with our respective graveyard partners and shoot the bull and have a good time. And later on, Kelly married an LAPD officer in the Ohio Patrol, or an LAPD. We call that a mixed marriage when the CHP and LAPD get together in a romantic way. And her husband's just a great guy, but they raised a beautiful family. And part of that family, one of those kids was Andy. Andy went on to obviously apply to and get accepted to the California Highway Patrol Academy. Later on, became a motor officer. Andy was responding to another incident that night when a gentleman made a U-turn from the right shoulder into the path of Andy's motorcycle, and that's how the collision occurred. You know, I got on the phone with Kelly, his mom, right after the accident, and went to visit him in the hospital, and he was again in the worst type of physical condition for a couple of weeks before he passed away. So I had a lot of time to talk with her and her husband, and I remember getting the phone call that day when Andy passed away. I remember exactly where I was. I was at my office as the chief, about an hour away from the hospital, and I got my patrol card and headed up to the hospital. I want to say something, that the outpouring from everybody you can think of, LA County Sheriff's Department, of course, LAPD, because Andy's father was an LAPD officer, fire departments, federal agencies, the community, different community groups, elected officials. It went on and on and on, the support that was shown for Andy. And he passed away 2 days before I retired. And he was the officer that died in the line of duty on my watch. And I think about Andy when I read about these people calling him, and yes, they're calling him a racist a white supremacist, like they called everybody on that list and like they called me. And I think about how evil, how disrespectful, how unkind, how uncaring, how thoughtless these types of statements are. And there's no mitigating it. There's no, well, we don't mean every, yes, you do mean every officer. You can't demean an entire profession like this when young men like Andy Ornelas are dying to look out for your ass. You can't say things like that and then not own them later on. The last thing that I was able to do of any substance, I think, of any impact, was be a part, was to be the very, very last car in a 1.5 mile long procession when they had to move Andy's remains from the hospital to the medical examiner's office. I was the last vehicle in a 1.5 mile long procession, like I said, of multiple agencies. We had freeways stopped throughout Los Angeles County. We didn't stop them, ladies and gentlemen. The opposing sides of the freeway, truckers, soccer moms, UPS drivers, you name, freeways just came to a stop because the procession was so long. By the time I got there, it was just literally people were outside of their cars waving hats and waving flags. And I'll never forget it. And every single overcrossing from Lancaster to downtown Los Angeles, every single overcrossing was manned by a fire department with their apparatus. LA County, LA City, Burbank, Glendale, you name it, every single overcrossing. And I was so saddened and so proud at the same time to have been a part of that memorial, that honoring of my friend's son and my colleague and a young man who'd been in the job for 4 years and gave his life to protect, pardon me, to protect a-holes like this who demeaned him. Don't forget, don't forget these men and women who gave their lives, who risked their lives every day, and don't forget the people. Don't forget the people who demeaned them and cursed them. Thank you. I'm the chief for your Leo Nation. God bless you. God bless our men and women in blue.